Hi everyone, Lynn Fairchild Hawks here. A little presentation on formative and summative assessment. So I want to cover real quickly some misunderstandings we tend to have and myths about gifted kids. We tend to give them not enough credit for wanting to slow down and really study some things. We worry that we ought to cover a lot, move quickly. Oh, these kids have probably already got this. I'm doing a disservice if I slow it down. I should plan my lessons first and then design an assessment because I need to come up with a really cool activity. That's another misunderstanding we tend to have. When actually, some truth. Curriculum instruction should be an inch wide and a mile deep. Let's allow deeper exploration. Gifted kids are really heterogeneous. They need a lot of skill practice. They may mask it with other abilities, but sometimes they have a lot of skill gaps. And learning pace varies because they are so heterogeneous. And the other thing is, let's not get too enamored of our cool activity. Let's come up with one, then put it on the shelf, step back and say, well, what are my desired outcomes with this activity? How is this assessment meaningful? What's the why behind it? What are my kids going to be able to do by the end of this? Let's make sure I get that straight first. So that's an important analytical step we all want to take. This is because 21st century learning, it's revolutionary. We're asking the question, what do we really need to know nowadays from memory when facts are at our fingertips? Instead of learning content just in case, like many of us grew up with, it's just in time. Let a problem, a big conceptual problem, drive our curriculum and instruction and the tasks that kids are doing today. Let's pose the problem first, the creative project first, before we start asking them to master facts or do discrete sort of isolated skill practice. So think about these questions as you are designing your curriculum. What ultimate product or performance could kids be doing that really require those skills of analysis, evaluation, and synthesis? Wonderful quote from Daniel Pink. If you look at the words in red, if we're preparing kids to be these kinds of career people, how would that change your curriculum? This is the prompt we're giving you. We want you to design some summative assessments that drive your whole 7-week curriculum. How can they be substantive and challenging, asking students to analyze, evaluate, and synthesize in a real-world practice of your discipline? So, 3 things to think about. Make your assessment comprehensive, coherent, and continuous. What do I want students to know and do by the end of this course? Am I just saying they're going to do this, or have I really thought about the macro and micro relationship of the skills required? And how do I know what the student mastery is going to look like at the end? When I give feedback, am I going to give feedback on both the macro and micro skill level practice? We know it's coherent is that everything you have them to do is connected or relates to one another. If they read something today, how does that relate to the culminating assessment? If they discuss something, write something, how is that practice for culminating assessment? And finally, you do want your assessment to be continuous. So thinking about the design and feedback cycle as all part of one long continuous process. What are you having them do before pre-assessment? What are you learning about what they don't know and can do and they can't do? It's a week later. Oh, how are students doing with mastering this skill? How am I using formative assessment to find out that information? And now it's a week later. How well can they now demonstrate a mastery? So look at this design, feedback, and learning flow. Think about, what are my goals? What are my skill objectives? I'm going to design a pre-assessment, and then I'm going to design the big final summative assessment. What learning activities will provide students with formative feedback? What skills are they practicing to get ready for the big deal assignment later? And finally, as they're doing these things and I'm giving them feedback, what adjustments am I making to my teaching and planning and daily instruction? So think about it in a 7-week e-studies term, you've got time for 2 to 3 skill objectives per week, or even maybe 4. Those are usually micro level. A few formative assessments every week. But for the entire term, 2 summative assessments is plenty. So I want to talk briefly before I define formative and summative assessment as a pre-assessment, what that is. This is an important test or quiz or writing prompt or some activity you give before the unit is actually taught. And it's a goal-setting thing, it's a low-stakes thing where you're getting important information from kids, but you want to keep it really low stakes, give them straight credit for just trying. Tells us everything about their readiness and ability level, their learning style, their interests. It's diagnostic. It can be objective. It can be like short answers, longer writing prompts, complete this formula, interest-based questions. It teaches you, what do your students know already? What can they do? What can't they do? What don't they know? What are their interests? And how are you going to make adjustments based on this information they're giving you at the beginning of the week, at the beginning of the unit? And also, it's going to help you differentiate. Talk to your academic coordinator if you have seen or know that your students have a great heterogeneity in this class and could use some tiered assignments. These are some great things to say to students if you're presenting them with pre-assessment to help get that low-stakes atmosphere going. You are coming to them as a teacher researcher. You're saying, hey, help me be a better teacher. That's a great inquiry-driven persona to have with your students. So let's talk about formative assessment. It's also synonymous with ongoing or interim. It happens after pre-assessment, though technically formative assessment and pre-assessment are synonymous, because if you're doing a lot of pre-assessment, it's kind of formative. It monitors student learning. It's a chance for you to give ongoing feedback to that diagnostic, not an evaluation, but instead a cue for you to plan next steps for instruction and student activities. So you give students this feedback, you help them feel in control of their learning. Let them tell you. You ask the right questions. Hey, tell me about what you did well. Hey, how could you target areas for improvement? It tells you where the misunderstandings and the struggles are. And of course, it's a chance to really drill down and figure out the micro skill objectives here and how students are doing with it so they can get to the macro skill level and do that summative assessment later. So here are just a few examples of what might constitute a formative assessment. And they can have any format. And the important thing is to think about variety and to think about the micro skill that drives it and making sure you're giving lots of different types of formative assessment. So here are some more examples. At the end of this presentation, you're going to see several more. Okay, so right now I'm just giving you the baseline, but then you're going to see specific examples from various eStudies courses. Grading, low stakes, straight points or credit, very feedback focused. You want to give meaningful, specific feedback. Could be written, video, or audio. Tell them what's strong, what needs work, and you're telling them this feedback vis-a-vis the rubric and models, anonymous student work samples. Some of them are mock-ups you've done if this is the first time you've ever done a particular activity or assessment. Sometimes it's helpful to have them do a predictive grade. So if I or you or your peer were to grade this right now, is it at a 3 level or more of a 2 or a 4? What would you say and why? And compare it to the rubric and the models. So, summative, what is that? Well, think about it as the culminating assessment that evaluates student learning at the end of something, at the end of a unit, at the end of the term. It's based on a model standard and success criteria. Usually it's like the grade level of, I think, all right, well, usually 8th through 9th graders should be able to do this level of work. And that's why those models and rubrics are so crucial for defining that. Students are demonstrating something, it's mastery and understanding. And ideally, if it's real-world practice, this assessment is them grappling with an essential question and telling you not only what they know and can do, but their essential understandings about concepts in your course. Often it's high stakes. It could be a high point value. It's mastery level of both macro and micro skills. These are complex, real-world, multi-layered tasks, macro and micro skills. It's been already partially practiced by a variety of formative assessments that were done prior. It probably won't be revised or redone. Instead of a quick snapshot on your phone, it's more like a formal picture you take and frame and put on the wall, stand back at, and say, all right, let's reflect on this, let's analyze it, and I'm going to give it a final grade of a 1, 2, 3, or a 4, which is our rating systems in eStudies. Here are some examples of what might constitute a summative assessment. What makes a great one? It should mirror a real-world task. There should be a purpose and a role where students are facing some kind of audience, whether real or simulated. Sophisticated use of knowledge. There should be demonstration of discipline-specific skills. Students are hopefully having a little bit of choice, if not a lot of choice, in how this is being done or what product or performance type is being used. It allows students to know the success criteria and the performance standards before they get started and see models and samples of excellent and average work. So you're going to be coming up with some rough draft prompts for at least 2 summative assessments. Keep this nice little acronym in mind: GRASPS, goal, role, audience, situation, purpose, product or performance, and standards for success. You get all the grasp done, then you have grasped summative assessment. What's the goal or the central problem in the task? You're telling students, hey, your task is to, the goal is to, your problem or challenge is, the obstacles to overcome are. For our role, what's the role? Who are they? What have you been asked to do? What's your job? Who's the audience? Who's going to receive this product or performance? Clients, your listeners, your judges, your target audience, or you need to convince so-and-so. S is for situation, circumstances in which the performance must be taking place or the product presented. So here's the context or atmosphere you find yourself in, requires you to consider such and such. P, product and performance or purpose. Outcome and reason we're here. We got to do this in order to get that. You need to develop blanks so that this can happen. And then finally S. We've talked about skill objectives. That's synonymous with standards and success criteria, measures of a good product or performance. You're going to be judged by this. You must meet the following standards. These are the skill objectives. Final thoughts. You're going to also, while you're designing these grasp type prompts for 2 summative assessments, you're coming up with a general plan of feedback in 2016. Just general, rough draft kind of thing. Weekly feedback, narrative, video, or audio form. Keep in mind, we advertise to families 10 to 14 hours of work a week, but really it's probably wise for you to plan for under that, maybe even 8 hours of rigorous academic work per week. So keep that in mind when you're planning just how many hours the summative assessment is going to take. Remember, there are bigger skills too that apply to any class in the program. And we're going to be sharing those eStudy skills with you so you can say, oh, you know, when it comes to collaboration or inquiry or persistence and task commitment, eStudies has already written up those skills for me. And of course, those dovetail nicely as, you know, they could fit on a rubric that you're already building with your very course-specific disciplinary skills. Remember that any task takes some time for them to take in and read and prepare for, so you want to allot time for that. And remember, they, at the age they are developmentally, will have misunderstandings and need to revisit tasks. So you need to build and pad your lesson planning in with time for that. We're, of course, here to help. Don't hesitate to contact an academic coordinator as you start to brainstorm and wrestle with templates. We're here to support you. Thanks for listening.